first, I'd really like to take a moment just to thank all of the participants in today's panel. One of the aspects of Core Life is really about knowledge and awareness, and more importantly, community to be able to not only age with dignity, but to have a sense of control in your life as you age. I think all of us have experiences, especially if you're in the sandwich generation, but we all have grandparents, we have people that are getting older. And aging comes with a lot of amazing things at that stage in your life, everything from grandkids to travel to being able to really feel comfortable with who you are in life. At the same time, you have some changes that aren't as welcome. You have often mobility issues, you have other health issues, and sometimes those health issues end up resulting in things like dementia, Alzheimer's, et cetera, which is why we want to have this conversation today. And in particular, we want to be able to provide a greater sense of not just awareness, but control in your life so that when you're facing certain issues, not only are you less afraid of them, but you understand how to recognize how to deal with them and how to be able to add life to your years in a way that allows you to really get the most out of your life and your family as well, because that's a fantastic time to really enjoy your family. So what I want to do is first, I'll introduce myself. I'm Barry Hillier. I'm an advisor with KoreLife, and I became involved with KoreLife for a lot of these reasons. As my family starts to age, I recognize the importance of having this knowledge, and I love the mission that Core has. It's also something that I realize we have a whole cohort that is going to be increasing into a new stage in life, and to be able to be part of a solution to help bring about greater confidence and greater awareness in how to be able to collectively get the most out of this is something I'm very passionate about. So I'd like to first introduce Kayla, and we'll just kind of go around the room here. Kayla, can you give us a little background and introduction on yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Kayla, right? I am the CEO and founder of KoreLife. My background varies quite a bit. I've gone from acute care positions all the way into memory care management, and really my passion is finding access for people, not necessarily just with seniors or dementia, but people as a whole, and where you fit into that. With all the roles I've had the privilege of being part of, you saw a big disconnect between what it meant to be a love giver and what it meant to be a caregiver. So I started Core Life about a year ago with a great team of people, with a lot of stories and a lot of backgrounds. And the idea is that us in Canada, we're very fortunate to have access and resources, but we're not always fortunate to know where to look. So we decided that it was time to change that, and it's time to find the right places for everybody, regardless of nationality, gender, religion. It didn't matter. What options are available to me, and where are they, and what kind of things can I utilize? So that's pretty much about it for me.
Well, one of the things that I love about Kayla when I first met her, and I think so many people in the healthcare industry certainly are very similar in terms of being caring and empathetic. But what I really appreciated about Kayla was she very definitively made it known that core life wasn't about whether or not you had money. It was all about aging with dignity. It was all about having a certain grace and respect in aging from everybody around you and to create a better healthcare system. Because as she said, even though there's a lot of failings, there's a lot of good out there. And the more that we understand how to navigate it, we're going to be able to have more control. So, Tanya, I'm going to jump over, just give you a second to give an introduction.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Kayla and Core, for having me on this presentation. And it means a lot to me to be able to present. I feel pretty passionate about what I do as well. I work with seniors. I've had a passion for seniors for many, many, many years. And I started off as a PSW, and then evolved my role into a memory care specialist here at our building, Summit Heights. And now I am the lifestyle director here. So I get to help all the same seniors find the right lifestyle choice for them, whether it be memory care or independent living or assisted living. So I get to live my passion every single day, which is fantastic. How could I ask for more? I absolutely love my job. So I'm very fortunate that way. Thank you again for having me.
No, you're very welcome, and we're really excited to actually have you on board because I think that there's one thing about learning about how to recognize when you may need to start to look at your loved one, and something might be off, and there's that early part where you're just going through the early diagnosis, but as things progress, knowing when to get to that next stage. And I think where a lot of the emotional difficulty comes into play here is they tend to be your mother, they're your father. There's such a close relationship that there's also that aspect of not only are you contending with a certain situation, but you don't want to feel like you're abandoning them. So being able to understand how, as a love giver, to be able to work with not only caregivers like yourself, but facilities like yours, I think it's absolutely critical, which is really where Jen Graham comes in. Jen, can you maybe introduce yourself as well here?
Hi, my name is Jennifer. Thank you so much for including me in this panel discussion today. I am relatively new to this topic, dementia. I have a very close family member who I'm a love giver to, and in the last year was diagnosed with dementia. But when looking back on it, this has been going on for a number of years at least. So I'm really I understand that speaking with friends, with colleagues, my experiences, my family's experiences are not at all unique. And a lot of us are going through very similar circumstances, situations. I'm excited or pleased to be here to share any of my experiences, but also to learn more about how to support and to love family members who are going through this right now. So thank you for including me.
No, thank you. And we really appreciate you being part of this. And then we've got Jen Crawley, who, just for everybody, I'll let her do a quick introduction, but Jen is going to be just helping manage Q&A. We will be having a Q&A. So please submit your questions. Jen, do you want to give a quick intro?
Hi all, I'm Jennifer Crowley. I've been working with the folks at my KoreLife for probably about a year, and it's a really interesting topic that I myself I'm kind of migrating into that age bracket where my parents are starting to get older, so I'm starting to think about all of these things, and it's really exciting to be part of this journey to provide resources to the public that help them along the journey that we know nothing about, and it's not often talked about. So hopefully we can change that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I'd like to kick things off is Tanya. I'd like you to take a moment to really talk about what's the definition, what are the types of dementia, how can we start to understand that? And I know that you've got a presentation that can help guide some of this, if you'd like to share.
Yes, I do have a presentation more on the 10 most common warning signs of somebody with dementia. Now, dementia is an umbrella word. Contained within the word dementia are many other different diagnoses of cognitive decline. And specifically, there's Alzheimer's, there are Lewy body, there are several different diagnoses. But in general, today, I'd like to kind of stick with the general word dementia, if that's okay. So I'd like to kind of introduce you to some of the 10 most common signs of dementia. And I'm just going to share a screen presentation here. So this is information that is actually taken directly from Alzheimer's Society's page. So all of this material is available to us, and I can always forward off this presentation to you as well. So the first sign that I'd like to speak about Our memory changes, of course, that affect day-to-day abilities. Now, if your loved one is forgetting things often or struggling to retain new information. Now, remember, it's normal to occasionally forget appointments, your colleagues' names, or even a friend's phone number, only to maybe remember them a little while later. But a person living with dementia, it's different. They may forget things more often, or maybe even have difficulty retaining information that they've recently learned, sorry. They may have a recollection of stories from, their childhood, but they may not remember what they've had for lunch a few minutes ago. And so that might be a clear warning sign. Difficulty to do familiar tasks. So maybe your loved one is forgetting how to do a typical routine or task, such as preparing a meal or getting dressed. Busy people, we often forget and we get distracted by time, from time to time, of course. And we may forget to add part of an ingredient to dinner, for example. Or, maybe we forgot our slippers on and we've left the door and forgotten to change our shoes. Sort of things like that are a little bit more normal. But a person living with dementia may have more trouble completing tasks that have been familiar to them their whole lives, like preparing a meal. A simple, maybe even a grilled cheese sandwich might become a difficult task. They might forget completely how to do that, or as simple as playing a game that they've been playing for their entire lives. A third sign could be changes in language and communication, which is a really big one. Your loved one may forget words or start substituting words that just don't fit into a normal conversation. I mean, we all come into that where we may forget a word once in a while, but a person living with dementia, they forget more simple words on a more frequent basis, and really have difficulty recollecting that word. So you can see the wheels turning almost, but there's no recall happening. And so the other thing that they maybe do is substitute words, like words that just don't belong in the sentence. And it makes it sometimes hard for us to understand what they're trying to say. And so it's, a part of a sign. A fourth sign is disorientation in their time and place. So having problems knowing what time it is of the day or of the week or even what month it is, and being lost in a familiar place that normally would be very familiar to them, like as simple as maybe even going for a walk around in their neighborhood. All of a sudden, the neighborhood is completely strange to them. They find themselves lost and not knowing how to get back is possible. And I say those without cognitive decline, we forget things very simply, but it's a little easier for us to recall. And, how often have we all thought, if I could just remember what I came into the kitchen for? But that's a little bit more normal. But when you're forgetting you're on your own street and you really don't recall or recognize, that's a little bit of a difference, and that could be a sign. Impaired judgment. That's a big one too. Not recognizing something that could be putting you in a health and safety risk. So the reason I have these pictures here is because, it may be a serene environment to what you and I might think, but for somebody who has no idea where they're going, getting lost in the woods could be detrimental to their survival, to be honest. If you can't figure out where you are, you're not able to get back where you came from, that could be a very, very scary thing. For you and I, we have, less cognitive decline. So we're able to use cues and markers to try to get ourselves out. But a person living with dementia may not have that judgment. Problems with abstract thinking, like problems with understanding what numbers and symbols mean. Things that we know this person has understood through their entire lives may now, even a mathematician may all of a sudden be having troubles understanding what the math symbols are. So, from time to time we forget our things. That's totally understanding. Maybe we have to have reminders of how to, complete certain tasks, but it's easy for us to recall. Someone living with dementia, they have challenges understanding, like I said, what those numbers even mean or what they're even used for, whether it be a letter or a number. Misplacing things or putting things away where they shouldn't be. We've all been guilty of losing our wallet or misplacing our keys, but a person living with dementia may put things in appropriate places. For example, putting your iron in the freezer, for example, or your wristwatch in the sugar bowl, just odd things like that. Putting the milk jug instead of in the fridge, you might put it in the cupboard accidentally. It's just that misconnection of information. Changes in mood and personality and behavior. This is very, very common as well. And I'm talking about severe changes in mood, not just for those of us who might get grumpy a little bit or get a little bit upset because things aren't going our way. A person with living dementia may experience severe mood changes. For example, they might become tearful or upset, but they don't know why. They have a difficulty explaining this. They feel confused, fearful, and suspicious, and may eventually withdraw from others because they just don't understand. They're just very confused to an extreme, to be honest. And their behavior changes from what is absolutely normal from them. Somebody who has been gentle and kind for their entire lives may turn into a sort of an aggressive personality, which is very unexpected and very difficult for some of our caregivers. Loss of initiative. This is a big one too. Like I said, when people don't really understand what's going on and they know that there's something not quite right, they may withdraw from their family and friends rather than engage and ask for help. So it's for somebody without cognitive decline, it's kind of normal for us to lose interest in housework, even business activities, or even social obligations. But somebody with my automatic lights just went off. Sorry. Somebody living with dementia may become passive and totally disinterested and completely withdrawn, and may need some more cueing and some more pushing to become engaged and more involved again in activity. The last sign I have here is challenges in understanding visual and spatial information. So what I mean to say is they actually have problems seeing things correctly or coordinating the spatial and visual information that they have in their head, their brains. So a person with dementia may have problems with vision, depth of perception, and movement. They may have challenges finding their way around the environment that they know very well, but suddenly it's a very strange environment. It could go to the extreme where hallucinations may even be happening, where they're seeing things that aren't actually there, but they're very convinced that those items or visual hallucinations are in fact there. And so sometimes it can be a cause of these issues, and it's really important to make sure that, again, I want to really emphasize the potential for an early diagnosis. When any of these things start happening, it's really, really important to get an early diagnosis so that you can prepare for what's coming.
This was great. And Jen, I saw you nodding. I want to kind of jump to you, and then I want to pull Kayla in. How does this, and Tanya, if you could unshare the screen, how do you find that what you just saw, how is that relating to what your experiences have been in the last year?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, and thanks so much for that, Tanya. That was really, really interesting. I would. There's a lot. I had no understanding of dementia. I thought it was about forgetting things. It was increasing forgetfulness, which we weren't seeing. And when I look back on the last probably 2-3 years, I think my relative actually knew things were happening before we saw it. I would say that the trouble with abstract thinking was the first time I started realizing, okay, something's going on here. And this person, my relative, had been a professional, and a very senior professional, very highly educated, and things that they'd been doing their entire life were no longer able to do. And that was the first, oh my goodness, something is going on here. And then, which I think was leading to some frustration we were experiencing. And so that was, I wish knowing these signs ahead of time is really, really helpful. So that's what while listening to those 10 signs, definitely the trouble with abstract thinking was what really stood out for me. And certainly I didn't recognize it at the time as, okay, that this is dementia. The other thing that, and I'm not sure if it's relevant now, but what I didn't realize about dementia was I thought it was difficult for family members, but that at least the person experiencing it would be blissfully unaware. I didn't realize that they are aware, and it's heartbreaking. It's difficult. It's devastating to watching someone you love know that there's something going on, that something's happening. So that's a really, for me, a very painful part of this process.
Well, and I think that that's a great comment to throw over for yourself, Kayla. In your experience, because you're in a unique position of you've been a love giver dealing with these, but you're also a caregiver, and you've seen all sides where you've been a professional that's tried to help people manage the situation. What are your experiences, and how would you add to the conversation in terms of what you've seen and what's important to know as a love giver and a caregiver?
Um, the first thing I want to say is that every feeling is valid, good, bad, and indifferent. One thing that I'll start with is something that my grandfather said to me. He doesn't have dementia, but he's been the primary caregiver and love giver of multiple relatives that have gone through dementia, healthcare crisis, sudden passings, things like that. And he said, "You're never ready for the time where people stop asking you and start telling you." And it was something that was very impactful for me. So, translating that into the question, it's a very hard process on both sides. Having been on an acute care perspective where you've seen the same person come through with the same kinds of concerns, what I usually told families was it's not as simple as forgetting anymore. It's a problem almost like going to dial up. So while it works most of the time, there's sometimes where there's a miscommunication with the computer and the rest of everything that's going on. So it's frustrating on both sides. Pride makes us do a lot of different things. But then you start feeling angry. Then you start feeling grief. And there's all these different emotions that are tied into the decisions that we make. So what you see a lot of families doing is, I'm sure he's fine. I'm sure dad's fine. I'm gonna wean down what we do, or don't bring dad here. No, you should absolutely bring dad, but there are places and options that dad can go where he's gonna be safe and be able to enjoy those things about what that experience is. And it may not be what you think. For instance, a lot of times, when you visit somebody, as you age, your priorities change. And what you're looking for out of that meeting or that interaction isn't so much the loud music or the people. It's those little connections you made. It might be a smell. It might be something that you experience. One of the educators that I spoke with many years ago when I started on the journey of making KoreLife said that you saw a lot of women as they got into stages of dementia where they reverted back to being mothers and caregivers. So you saw people bringing in dolls and things like that to help make them feel more at ease. So a lot of people translate success to parts of their lives that they did very well at. So if you look at all of our generation and our parents and their parents, what did they do when they were 20? So if your parent was, let's say it was your mother and not your father, what was she primarily doing in her 20s? Now they've noticed a huge change as people have evolved, and we've had a lot of differences, whether it be two people working households, things like that, where you revert back to your 20s, but you were a secretary, or revert back to your 20s and you were a mother, and that was your primary identity. So it's very hard to respect identity while promoting safety. And one of the things that I really love, and I'm going to throw Tanya under the bus, is I met her a couple years ago. But what a lot of places offer is a way that you can foster a safe environment, promote dignity, but more importantly, it's not an institution. You shouldn't be ashamed that your spouse, relative, parent has dementia. It's how do we do this gracefully, and what do we do to promote those things? Tanya mentioned there's multiple types of dementia. There's over 7 types of dementia, and how it affects everybody's different, whether it be aggression, whether it's forgetfulness, whether it's I don't find the same joy as I used to. And all of these things kind of play into what do we do next? And as a family member, you can look back at that list and go, wow, I should have noticed that. But how could you? most of the signs and symptoms for dementia are signs and symptoms that we deal with every day. They're signs and symptoms that you go, oh, that's normal. You know, he's 80 years old, or she's 75. She's had 10 kids. She's worked a huge life. She's tired. But maybe it's not just tired. And by the time you do notice those changes, it really is a matter of reflection, right? But it's not a matter of we failed somewhere. And that's where I feel there's a huge disconnect. Whether you succeeded or not, there's no failure here. And it's not necessarily I have dementia. It's living with, and there's a big difference.
So I think that there was a lot of really good context and a lot of good information in terms of what you just said, especially with understanding not just what's happening in terms of literally the minds of the people with dementia, but also the families and how they can process all of these feelings. Because in the same way that I think you've got the mothers and the fathers who are essentially going back to that point in time when they felt at their best. You also have these kids who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, who they're still the little boy and the little girl. That's your mother, that's your dad, and that can be very hard. So a question came up. My grandmother's been diagnosed with dementia recently. How and where do we start looking for help? We're having trouble finding resources or general direction on what we should be doing. So, Tanya, I'm going to kind of throw over to you to start, and then over for yourself, Kayla, to add to that.
Okay, absolutely. And thank you for that. I do have a little bit of a presentation, another one I'd like to put up. It is about the 7 signs that it's time for memory care. So we'll start there if that's okay. I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so here are the 7 typical signs that it might be time for a memory care facility. Okay. Sign number 1, difficulty performing your ADLs or your activities of daily living. Dementia leads to progressive decline in abilities, so your loved ones may have increased challenges with their independence and activities of daily living, also known as what we call ADLs, okay? If you have a difficult time lifting or maneuvering a loved one for bathroom visits, that can be very dangerous for you, and not only yourself, but for them as well. And it could cause hazards for continuing care at home. So it might be time to look into a facility at that point. Alzheimer's disease and other diseases of dementia may also result in chronic incontinence, which could be very difficult to handle at home as well. And in order to prevent infections, incontinence care requires special equipment and also supplies beyond what's sometimes possible at home. So that might be one sign that it's time. Another sign might be some serious changes in behavior. As the disease progresses, it's common for those with dementia to experience irritability, agitation, aggression, and sundowning, which happens generally in the evenings. And I'm not sure if one of you want to touch on sundowning a little bit. Maybe Kayla, you can sort of lead into that a little bit, because I think that's also an important topic to discuss. These behaviors intensify over time, and they can be difficult to redirect and cope with as a solo family member and a solo family caregiver and love giver. Sorry. Memory care staff at our residences are very much trained in person-centered care and cognitive behavioral techniques to skillfully redirect any difficult behaviors that may come up. We talked briefly about the delusions and hallucinations. Your loved one may begin to experience delusions and hallucinations with the progression of their dementia. It can be very stressful to help your family member navigate life at home when they're seeing and experiencing things that aren't real. In some cases, it may also put you and your loved one in danger, truthfully. And if you're trying to determine when memory care is needed, this may be a very clear sign for you. Wandering and falls. If your loved one wanders, it can be hard to keep them in a secure environment at home. Unsupervised wandering may result in dangerous falls, injuries, and becoming lost, which is very, very horrible thing to even think about. Wandering behavior that is increasingly difficult to prevent or manage may be a sign that memory care facility is necessary. Our modern memory care communities, they have built-in safety features as we do in our home. We have a nice secure memory care floor. So our loved ones are meant to stay inside the unit, and they can be themselves within that unit and feel safe and know that, and family caregivers and love givers know that their family member is secure and safe. Um, we have things too, like continuous loop walkways, so that our loved ones can walk. Is a very common thing for residents with dementia to do a lot of walking, and we have safe and secure places for them to walk and not be lost in our community. No matter where your loved one wanders throughout a memory care community, usually they are safe and sound and always supervised. And so that's something that might be beneficial to somebody when coming into a memory care facility. Refusal of care. This is a big one. One of the most heartbreaking parts of dementia is that your loved one may even start to refuse care from you as their caregiver or love giver. They can even show signs of paranoia and further prevent your care activities. It can also be increasingly challenging if your loved one no longer accepts your help in any way. Common things like, "Don't. What are you doing? Why are you bossing me around? I've got this. I can do this." But really, we know from seeing and observing that they cannot. In the memory care, this person-centered care techniques commonly taught to dementia care staff make the best option, really, truly, for your loved one's successful care. We have on our memory care floor an interactive kitchen. Barry, you mentioned, and Kayla, you mentioned about how people may revert back to what they knew in their former years. And it's true, we see that quite often. And we actually have a mock kitchen for that very reason, so that if we see somebody, sort of making the actions of maybe wiping down a counter, I might say, "Hey, Sally, why don't you come on over here? I'm really behind on my dishes. I could really use your help. Would you mind assisting me with dishes?" And 90% of the time, yes is the answer. And next thing you know, we have a very meaningful activity with with a safe environment. And so you're right, they do revert back quite often. Increasing physical decline and health issues. It may be time for memory care when you notice a significant decline in your loved one's physical health. As dementia progresses into the later stages of the disease, it's common to see a dramatic loss of mobility and worsening of physical health. Memory care communities have entire healthcare teams to support your loved ones, including specialized dietitians, doctors, therapists, PSWs, and memory care specialists. Choose a memory care facility and a community that can successfully address your family members' individual care and health needs. And the last sign I have here is depression and isolation. This was a big one. We learned a lot about this over COVID, and having our loved ones isolated over COVID, we realized a lot of things and how detrimental to their health it really truly is. If you're caring for a family member at home, it may be difficult to create opportunities for recreation and social connection as their healthcare declines. They may refuse to leave the house. They may refuse to see anybody else but you. They may receive, there's so many different things. Social isolation and loneliness may have negative effects on your loved one's wellness, increasing the risk of depression, anxiety, and other dementia behaviors such as agitation. Sorry, automatic lights. Agitation. Memory care communities like ours typically have on-site activity directors who specialize and tailor the events for the memory care needs of our residents. Social connections remain important as dementia progresses as well, and many memory care communities can be vibrant and exciting with plenty of things for everybody to do, including parties, activities, and entertainment curated just for those residents.
Well, this is really good. And I think there was an additional follow-up question. I'm going to throw it over to Kayla, and then we're going to go back because I know, all seniors care is in a unique position being able to actually have access to the facilities that are needed. But Kayla, maybe if you can first talk about, are these offerings standard across homes, and how do you consider how and at what point do you want to make certain determinations for your loved ones? Then, Tanya, you can talk a little bit about your facility in particular, and then we'll jump into to some questions for Jen.
So one thing that has to be recognized when it comes to dementia is that because dementia is not something that's black and white, there's many different variances of need. Not everybody that gets diagnosed with dementia requires a memory care unit right away. Sometimes it takes a long time to get to that need. So how that need's determined is basically we're going to start with geographically. So not every home offers memory care. It's actually pretty selective. I will say, as somebody who's worked in a wide variety of different regions and capacities, memory care is actually pretty new in terms of what Ontario retirement has done. I've seen a lot of really great ones. I am going to speak to a couple of them, but what they've done is they've essentially given you the option to gracefully go into more needs. So Tanya mentioned the need for possibly walking. So you'll find that a lot of homes that do offer memory care have something that almost resembles a donut. Because once that resident is able to walk through, they're able to find tasks throughout that unit that might speak to them. I've seen lots with gardening, lots with a care facility, maybe something that resembles an office, but it all centers around usually a communal garden or a communal food space. So what a lot of homes are starting to realize is that the need has become a little bit more severe. And while somebody may need help with a memory portion of their life, they may not necessarily need a full assisted living need. They may be able to still ambulate quite well. They may be able to still articulate their needs. They may still have quite a lot of um, vigor and zest for life. So they may not need something where you would need more help from like the Lynn trying to find out what you're looking for. So what we did with KoreLife, and something that really translates into what Tanya does, is getting a platform where you can really assess what those needs look like. And maybe mom's not ready for a memory care floor yet, but it's coming. Is dad still present? Are you wanting them to move together? Do you want to keep them at home? I know Tanya mentioned sundowning. That's a very difficult process to deal with. And as a senior starts to develop more needs, as a love giver, this is where you give the best form of caregiving. It's separating those two things and going, I'm their daughter. Her personal care is private. Have the proper care so that you can be the love giver. Sit down and have dinner. Make sure you're hiring the right staff. Make sure you're bringing in the right things that mom or dad might need. And it's not always facility, but I do see a lot of change from an acute care perspective in residents that have the need for facility that are actually in one versus somebody who is at home because I, for lack of better terms, feel guilty sending mom to a community. And I know that for myself, I look at my family and I go, God, I couldn't imagine sending, person A to a facility. But there are facilities, and I'm going to speak to Tanya's just because it's something I've seen and I've seen it work well. If you go to the right community, you do your homework, you're abreast with knowledge that you have rights and your family member has rights, and those rights can be respected, whether it be personal belief or just general. And you don't have to worry about mom or dad coming out improperly dressed. You don't have to worry about all those things. Instead, why don't you worry about being there for Sunday dinner? Why don't you worry about doing those things so that a little bit of that pressure is off? Because the reality is, dementia is a progressive disease. And I'm going to say illness. I'm not going to call it a disease. It's an illness. And that illness is something that changes aspects of mom or dad, but mom or dad is still very much there. And that part is very hard to understand. So typically, when you look at homes, if I'm starting to think, I have a diagnosis of dementia, you really want to start looking at retirement communities that foster that memory care floor and seeing, is this something that is likely going to happen? If so, it's important to start really navigating which ones are more important. Is it geographical? Is there financial components you have to think about? Is it maybe religious based? There's lots of homes that cater to certain environments across Ontario and Canada. Is there something that's special to you that you really want to care about? Do you have pets? Are they coming? All of those kinds of things are things you have to think about. And as you navigate it, it can get very confusing for a family member of what's the right thing to do, and where's the places to go. Like, it says they have memory care, but Is there a wait list? Is it in my budget? Is it in my region? All of those kinds of things start to go, wow, where do I get that information?
Well, one of the things that I really want to kind of point out for everybody from a resource standpoint is you can go to My Core Life, KORE life.com, and there's a lot of information in terms of blogs, resources, as well as facilities. Um, but one term has come up, sundowning, a couple of times. I see as Kayla's having a sip of water. Oh, both of you. Can either of you maybe just explain what exactly is sundowning?
Yeah. So sundowning it's been linked back to a circadian rhythm. So as the brain sends signals differently as dementia progresses, it can change the wake and sleep cycles of a resident. So that resident might feel more comfortable sleeping at 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., but then they're up throughout the night doing things that would be typical, whether it be getting dressed, whether it be making a meal. A resident might get dressed and start heading to work at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's where they're reliving that experience. But the timeline is all shifted. So there's a lot of differences with sundowning because the person that you might greet during a sundowning cycle might not be somebody you recognize. So it could be somebody that's very aggressive. It could be somebody that's very timid and shy. It could be scared, or it could be very confused. And with sundowning, it's not always the same. Even if the resident itself is the same, the person that emerges during that cycle is very different each time. So it's something that memory care specialists, again, I'll throw back over to Tanya, a memory care specialist is somebody who's trained to really know those differences. And that's where that love for your relative comes into play. And you go, maybe it's time to start thinking about a unit that caters to that, because that specialist that's working there overnight is used to this. So when mom comes out and she's ready for work and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe they're going to fold some towels and get her redirected back to bed. Maybe there's a tea that's made, and maybe it's something that you foster for a little bit and you go, okay, what can I do to help make you feel a little more comfortable? Change of environment can cause major sundowning differences, loss of a loved one, change of environment. All of those things can cause increases or decreases in that sundowning cycle. But it's basically just a change in when their wake cycle is happening and the person that's coming.
So that's really interesting, Jen. I know your loved one is at the beginning, but
Mhm.
how many of these concerns, and what was your consideration? I know that they're in a facility. What are things that you wish you would have known a little bit earlier? Would it have changed anything for somebody else that maybe not at that first stage of transitioning into a facility of some sort? What do you wish that you would have known or considered?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. So my relative is in a retirement home that does not have memory care. When they made this, and this was a decision that was made by my relative, not we weren't involved with the decision. Um, and It was for a variety of factors, and dementia and memory at that point was not an issue. I was aware at the time, sort of in the back of my mind, I remember thinking, what happens as things, if dementia was to become an issue? And so it is right now no longer in the back of my mind. It's sort of starting to percolate in the front that we may have to consider or start looking into um, options with memory care. We're not there yet. And I have had conversations with the home to talk about, where things are at. And right now we're not there. But do I wish I had known? I'm not sure if that would have made a decision, but I do wish that there was memory care available. One thing, if I can just very quickly, I really appreciated the comment about having dementia versus living with it. And I'm not sure if it was Tanya or Kayla that talked about how often people will revert back to things that they remembered and fond memories. And I'm looking at things I've done in the past where I'm trying to create new memories, and I'm trying to, exposing to new things, and it really backfires. And yet when we do activities that are the same, is, lather, rinse, repeat, they really go over well. And sometimes I think, oh, I'm being lazy, or I'm being, it's not very inventive, or it's not very exciting, that some of the activities that we do, but the same thing every week, the same routines seem to really bring a lot of peace and happiness, and that's where there was. And recently there was a family dinner, and it wasn't particularly exciting, but there were some family members that hadn't seen each other in a while, and that brought a lot of joy. So it was going, memories from before. So I just wanted to, that really resonated with me when you mentioned that about where they used to be.
Well, and I think that's a great leap off, because understanding where people were, how they can be more comfortable, is really critical in terms of finding that right spot. So Tanya, I'd like to ask, All Seniors Care is a great facility. We highly recommend it from KoreLife.
Thank you.
Not everybody is going to be able to go to you simply because of geography, but in considering any facility, can you help maybe? What are the resources? What are the questions? How should somebody be evaluating all of these things, including the things that may not be happening yet, in order to best find the right home for our loved ones?
I think that's a great question, and I would really like to touch on that as well. Yes. I can speak on my behalf on my facility. We are a all Canadian company, and we do stretch all across Canada. So if anybody would like some information about a residence that might be closer to them, please reach out and let us know. I can offer you information on that residence. But across the board, we do have a complete age-in-place facility here. So we, just like what Jennifer was talking about, where her loved one is in retirement but not in memory care, we do have that same. We have independent living, and we do like to start our residents with mild to moderate cognitive decline in independent living. We do have a program in place. It's called Blossom Living. And that allows our residents to live somewhat independently with somebody who offers them very person-centered care. So keeps their best interest in mind, engages them in activities that are relevant to their cognitive decline. And it's a very small community. So it's a very small group of people, of like-minded individuals. So you're creating a friendship group within a friendship group, if that makes sense. And everybody that works here, we're well aware of who these people are, so that we can also approach them in the same way. And so they remain independent somewhat, which is very, very important, because over the course of their cognitive decline, they're going to lose a lot of that independence, and that can be very, very difficult. So if we can preserve that as much as possible, I think that's one of the most important things that we can do here. The other thing is that our building also has secure memory care floors. And so once the diagnosis has been made that we're now moving from a mild to moderate to a severe diagnosis, then we can start thinking about, is it safe for them to remain independent in their independent suites any longer? Or is it time for them to go to a part of our facility where it's more 24-hour monitoring and 24-hour care? Of course, we can put some PSW care in place in independent living, but in our assisted living and memory care floors, it is 24-hour care, and it is care as needed, and person-centered. So we have that wonderful age in place. Our residents don't have to leave to go to another facility because of the cap on the care level. We really have the ability to care right up until a person is requiring even a 2-person mechanical lift, which is really unique to our facility.
Well, and that's great. And so similar to Jen, what happens if our loved ones are in a facility that doesn't have memory care? What are their options? Can they get help from the outside, or what's that transition? Either Kayla or Tanya, whoever would like to answer that.
Well, it really depends on the severity of the situation. So I'll speak to a couple things, and then maybe Tanya can fill in. What All Seniors Care has done is very revolutionary. What we see across the board is, once a resident starts to need out. So need out means that they have exceeded what that home is capable of providing. And let's be clear on that as well. Not every home is designed to handle a 2-person lift. It's a very specific set of skills. It's a very specific set of requirements. So when the home is approaching and saying it might be time for mom or dad to exit this facility, it's for their safety and their best interest in mind. It's not because the home's not good. It's not because you picked wrong. It's because that home has specific needs. So what ends up happening usually is that there's one of two things. We get on a wait list, and that wait list can be long, but sometimes not so long, depending on location or need or even financials. But you find a list of homes that gear towards that memory care unit. So sometimes it's assisted living, sometimes it might not be. And you'll have an assessment done. And that assessment will basically determine what kind of needs your mom, dad, or relative have and what that need translates to you. So it might be something like, mom and dad are doing very well, but mom's decline is becoming a little bit more severe. Is this home somewhere that they are able to take both mom and dad? And you start to really weigh out from there while mom or dad is still in the other home. As those needs start to increase, then we can usually hire external PSWs to kind of fill in the gaps while we're transitioning. The other way that residents leave the building is if there's been an injury. So in the event that mom or dad's fallen and they've gone to the hospital, the home may decide not to bring mom or dad back. So I know it's very frustrating. Personally, I've been through this. Professionally, we've been through this, and it's a very daunting task because there's a lot that goes into it. And I remember speaking to a business colleague and going, there's so many things that go into this decision. And it could be rehab, it could be this, it could be that. And he assured me that no, that there's no way that that would happen. But then experiencing it himself, he goes, wow, this is exactly what happened. So mom or dad might be at the hospital where there'll be a care coordinator at the hospital that will determine the best fit. And mom or dad would get reassessed there. And as they're waiting, they'd stay at the hospital for their safety. So the reason for that is that they are a 24-hour care facility. So because of that, if mom or dad's safety is at risk at any point, they won't be brought back to a home that's not able to staff their needs. Right? But again, being clear, every single home has different skills. And those different skills cater to very specific markets. And the reason that they've done that is to provide optimal care. So it's not because the home doesn't want to bring mom or dad back. It's not because the home's difficult or mom's difficult. It is because if they fell again, and they had a broken hip, or they fell again and they got seriously injured, they need to be able to care for that resident with the same dignity you would expect from the family member, right? So generally speaking, this can be a very difficult process for somebody navigating that journey of should we have memory care. If we're already looking and all of a sudden mom gets injured at an independent facility and she's not allowed back, yes, in some instances that gets you up the list a little faster, but in others, mom had to get hurt first, and that sucks. From a general perspective, that just sucks. So what you'll find is sometimes the PSWs will talk to a family member and go, hey, I've noticed mom's been forgetting a little bit more, or I've noticed that I've had to redirect mom quite a bit more times than usual, or dad's getting really aggressive, or he's very pleasant throughout the day, but I keep having to tell him what step is next. So most facilities will start to let you know that there's been a change and we need to really start evaluating it. And then every 6 months, usually a new assessment's done to keep that current so that we know that mom or dad's shown a significant decline. Let's talk to mom, let's talk to the daughter and see what next steps can happen. But ultimately, it's just a matter of planning. And while we're planning, different things can come up, which will change that trajectory, if you will.
No, I think a lot of really good advice and a lot of good thoughts for everybody going through this to be able to consider. In the interest of time here, one of the things that we said, this is just the beginning of a conversation. We're going to be continuing these conversations. We're building our community on My Core Life. That includes, we've got a forum for people to be able to interact. We will be having many, many, many more webinars. Having said that, we all have time constraints in our lives. So if everybody, and I'm going to start with Jen, if each of you can provide maybe some closing thoughts or tips that you think might help somebody who is experiencing directly or via a loved one dementia. Jen, what are your thoughts to close this out?
I think listen to your family member, listen to what they're saying, listen, to the verbal and the nonverbal cues. And I think we learned this earlier in this today's session. Don't dismiss necessarily what you think. You think, oh, it's just they're in a bad mood, or it's just listen to what they're saying and then provide the support. If they are reaching out with some comments and they look like they're asking for some help or they're questioning, listen to that.
Thank you, Tanya.
I would just like to say that humans with dementia can live very meaningful and productive lives for many, many years, especially with an early diagnosis. I would really like to stress the importance of doing your best to get an early diagnosis so that you can set in motion a proper treatment plan, a proper coping plan, and plan for your future ahead of time so that you don't become in a crisis situation.
Great. And Kayla.
I'm definitely going to follow that as well. Early diagnosis is very important. I do want to stress that, again, it's living with dementia. So there are plenty of options out there. It's about research, and it's about knowing that I don't have to be embarrassed that my mom or dad or relative or significant other's been diagnosed with dementia. It's about going, they have dementia, now what? And I hope that by having these webinars and by having a platform where like-minded or even not like-minded people can share their experiences and share what's worked for them, it might help another family member. I know from my experience, keeping everybody at home is what my heart wants to do, but sometimes that's what the detriment is. It's okay to say mom needs more help. It's okay to say, I don't know what to do. What do I need help with? And finding the right people to do that is imperative. We're a community. It's not, I have to tough this out.
No, that's great. And I'd like to thank everybody for what's been a very, very needed hour in conversation, but a very thoughtful one as well, given that the topic at hand. I'll also say, in addition to what we currently have at My Core Life, I know we're going to be reaching out to Tanya and adding blogs, including how to actually reach out to her facilities, how to become involved. As well as to provide any other help, and we can answer any additional questions in the forum. So if anybody still has questions or like to see certain things in webinars, please let us know. We will be sharing all of these facilities as well as links to all the participants who had registered, as well as the people who registered but weren't able to attend. So I'd like to thank everybody for your time today, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.